This is the first in a series aimed at identifying behavioral annoyances I would rather not have to deal with, but hey, you can't always get what you want. I would rather discuss them here in one central place than have to repeat my reasoning in all of my future videos. So without further ado, I present pet peeve number 1. Call me an optimist, but I rather enjoy honest conversations with other people about facts and the ideas that attempt to explain them. Just trying to approach the truth of any given topic. I'm not so interested in small talk, which I tend to regard as a palate cleanser, to lift a phrase from my brother. My mother tongue is English, which is fortunate for me, as it seems to be the de facto global business language and therefore is as close to a universal language as you will find. This maximizes my chances of holding a productive discussion with people from other countries, on the odd chance I should encounter any. Were I to visit another country whose language I did not understand, say for example Iceland, it would prove difficult to engage in this pastime, should any Icelander I meet, too, not understand English. The thing is, though, we would both be quite aware of this chasm separating us. We would be reduced to communicating with gestures and tonal inflections. Any actual words used would be indistinguishable from gibberish to the other. Perhaps a combination of repeated utterances with accompanying gestures would slowly force a few foreign words into memory, but there would be no real chance of a meaningful discussion of ideas. This short introduction sets the general direction of this talk. Words in any language are only useful if its users agree on the definitions of those words. For this, there are dictionaries, which serve as a reference, so that we may know what we're talking about. Throughout this talk, my reference will be the online version of Merriam-Webster. If you reject that source, there is some chance you will not understand the meaning I am trying to convey. Merriam-Webster is a standard, but you can expect similar definitions from most published dictionaries. It may be that not all dictionary entries have similarly clear definitions, but this is often an inherent limitation of words. Dictionaries generally do not drive the language, they reflect it, and are thus marginally dynamic. New words are added from time to time as they gain in popularity and become entrenched. Old words no longer used are sometimes jettisoned or declared obsolete. This is solely at the discretion of the editors of the dictionary. There is no official American dictionary. The rate of change of the contents of any dictionary must logically be slow, indirectly proportional to the number of users of that language, else chaos ensue. Cliques rapidly adapt to new internal slang terms or modified meanings, but they generally do not employ dictionaries, so that others can know what they are saying. Try that with 1.5 billion English speakers worldwide. You cannot rapidly change most languages and reasonably assume everyone will keep up. No, change must be organic and not forced, or the language will fracture. All of this is natural and expected. I hope we are on the same page so far. To me, trouble arises when attempts are made to radically alter the definition of an existing word, often covertly. I'm not referring to minor adjustments or clarifications. I will concede that many common definitions would benefit from such. I mean wholesale change. I present a short, incomplete list of modern examples of this phenomenon in the following politically charged words. Liberal. Original meaning: a person whose political goals are largely mirrored in the original Bill of Rights in the United States Constitution. Proposed meaning: whereas the original meaning embraced only negative rights, which oblige inaction, liberals in the United States today have expanded the definition to include positive rights, which oblige action. Examples of negative rights include the freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, self-defense, privacy, etc. Examples of positive rights include a right to health care, a right to a living wage, a right to free education. What these latter demands have in common is that someone must pay for them, whereas negative rights require only judicial non-interference. Gender. Original meaning: social traits typically associated with one sex, of which there are but two. Associated third-person pronouns are he, him, his, for male, and she, her, for female. Traditionally, English has no such pronouns for people who are intersex, a failing which has contributed to the current gender redefinition debate. Proposed meaning: The same social traits attributed to an open-ended list, which is not necessarily associated with one's sex, which results in a potentially endless variety of third-person gender pronouns, for example, sie, zim, zer, which, unless respected, causes offense to some who identify as a new gender, provided, of course, that those engaging in said offense ignore English grammar, which stipulates that such pronouns be used only in third-person scenarios, wherein the offended party would generally not be present to be offended, and would therefore take offense only after being informed thereof after the fact. Racist. Original meaning. Someone who attributes traits or capabilities to another based solely on their race. Proposed meaning. Someone who belongs to the race, and perhaps gender, that dominates the political and economic arena of a country, and engages in the behavior described in the original meaning of this word. There should apparently be no word for anyone outside that collective who engages in such boorish behavior. Whether or not this word applies to countries where this collective consists of other than straight white men is unclear. Socialism. Original meaning. Collectivist political system that demands complete public ownership of the means of production, which, where implemented, has led among other calamities to the starvation deaths of millions of people. Proposed meaning. Collectivist political system that exalts the virtues of state-sponsored social welfare programs, which by definition is an open-ended list, which when extrapolated, culminates logically in complete public ownership of the means of production. Nazi. Original meaning, short form of the German word Nationalsozialist, or National Socialist, a German political party of the early to mid-20th century led by Adolf Hitler and associated with genocide, extreme racial discrimination, and ambitions of global conquest. Proposed meaning, anyone who questions the motives or intelligence of the proponents of the proposed new definition of socialism. Fascist. Original meaning, a form of socialism wherein the responsibility for the fiscal health of a means of production is held in private hands, but the control of said enterprise is commandeered by the government. Think, they eat the candy, you get the cavity. Proposed meaning, synonym for Nazi. Are the advocates of these radical definition alterations intentionally trying to fracture the language? Why this tactic? Is it to leverage the emotional weight of existing words? Is this an attempt to shortcut the tedious job of building up a new word's emotional weight and public acceptance? Notice how nobody is trying to hijack tomato, or shirt, or desk, or any other word that doesn't trigger a strong emotional response. Everyone who is using this tactic could have pursued an honest course by coining a new word, putting in the indefinite amount of work to raise its public status so that eventually dictionaries would include it. Perhaps that's asking too much, when actual real-world parasites have already shown us all a much easier way. Far less tedious to worm your way into an existing host and live off of its success. Personally, I find this tactic reprehensible. The resulting chaos that follows the use of these definitions is worse than my Icelandic example above. I recognize the words and cannot help but attribute common usage definitions to arrive at an understanding of the sentence. However, I also realize that the definitions I use are not necessarily those of the speaker, but since I am uncertain as to which word definitions we agree on and which we don't, not to mention which alternative definition is actually in play, the sentence could have an endless number of meanings. Lacking guidance, I can only assume I have no idea what the sentence means, mimicking the earlier, gibberish scenario. What is different here is that there was no reason to assume my Icelandic friend was not being sincere, whereas straying from common use definitions without prior widespread agreement is disingenuous and frankly a waste of time. How can any productive exploration of ideas proceed from such deception? Short answer, it can't. And once this deceptive practice is used, why would anyone trust this speaker again without substantial proof of good intent? My conclusion to all this is, I can engage in a discussion about the meaning of a single given word. what its dictionary definition is, why that definition may be lacking, what definition would better suit the word, etc. What this scenario assumes, however, is that all involved have at least a rough agreement on the meanings of all the other words in our exchange. If not, the situation quickly degrades into the gibberish scenario, which is not productive, a waste of time, and one from which I will always excuse myself. I don't understand gibberish and haven't the time to pretend I do.